Greetings citizens of the world, governments and corporations. We are anonymous. This video will be to explain and clarify a few things. In the opening weeks of February 2015, in the run-up to the Chinese New Year, the mainstream media was awash with stories relating to an online campaign by the international hacktivist movement collectively known as Anonymous. The campaign itself involved the systematic dismantling and takedown of much of the online infrastructure employed by the equally globalized terrorist network, ISIS, to assist in its ongoing training and recruitment program. The same matrix of servers, websites and social media accounts has also been used by ISIS to issue proclamations, distribute propaganda and present its warped and sadistic worldview to the international community generally, and would thus present a legitimate target to any would-be freedom fighter concerned with the way that governments and corporations alike have allowed things to go in the Middle East. To outsiders unfamiliar with the workings of the Anonymous collective, however, this seemingly sudden attack upon ISIS and its cohorts seemed to have come completely out of the blue, and as little more than a follow-on to the earlier Operation Charlie Hebdo, itself an online response to the terrorist attacks in Paris a few weeks previously. In fact, the original spark that set off the conflagration, which has continued to burn ever since, was rooted in something altogether different, and had a completely different motivation to the one which many media commentators, both mainstream and underground alike, have recently supposed. The highly respected online blog Rcord, which has tackled some truly groundbreaking stories in the past, including some very well-researched pieces on the so-called cyber caliphate, the supposed army of hackers that make up the Islamic State's online cyber terror network, whose previous exploits have included attacks on a number of high-profile social media accounts connected with the U.S. military, described Operation ISIS, as this particular anonymous operation has come to be known as being whack-a-mole without a plan. In reality, however, nothing could be further from the truth. In order to understand the motivations of the tiny anonymous strike team that set out to take out the cyber caliphate pretty much on their own, and at the time without the backup of some of the other major players in the hacktivist stakes, the journalist or researcher needs to follow the flow of the storyline back to its original source. In traditional Chinese Kung Fu there is a saying that in all things one must always remember the source from which one is drinking. In China such traditions are maintained through the ages, by the continuous passing down of knowledge from one generation to another, in the form of organized rituals tacked into the cycles of the seasons, and the natural processes at work in the cosmos, that govern the life cycles of all living things. Perceive the way of nature, and no force of man can harm you, run the words of one particularly memorable proverb. Unfortunately, the way that the mainstream media is structured and organized, no such protocols are followed, and no such rituals observed in the fashion of ancient Taoist or Buddhist ascetics. All stories are generally reduced at all levels to the lowest common denominator, with people who know little or nothing about Anonymous commenting about what does and doesn't motivate Anonymous, when they themselves have never had any direct involvements or dealings with any of the members of the hacktivist network whatsoever, and are therefore not even qualified to speculate upon how the membership thinks, never mind how it carries out its operations. It is fact that the Anonymous network generally is drawn from every single strata of civil society, and, whilst it is certainly very true that on certain key issues, such as that of not ISIS, all those different and sometimes disparate elements do certainly come together in unity, the Anonymous family is often as divided and factional as any more traditional, not so anonymous family in any city, town, or isolated rural village in the world. It is perhaps for this reason and this reason alone, that it is important to set the record straight as to what exactly it was that sparked off ISIS, so that those who think or claim that they are in the know, when in fact they know nothing, can perhaps be enlightened with regard to what makes Anonymous, and certain moral fag-anons in particular, think, as an Anonymous insider, and a long-serving member of the small but capable strike team that hit a series of ISIS websites in the immediate aftermath of Op Charlie Hebdo, as January 2015 began to draw to a close, an event that was initially reported only by the far from mainstream counter-current news website. I am in a position to reveal that like so much that Anonymous is involved with. One of the primary motivations behind the attack was to expose government lies about what the cyber caliphate had been getting up to. The fact that the US military in particular had been lying to its own people about what ISIS had been doing, in addition to keeping them misinformed about the extent of the cyber caliphate's online capabilities, was one of many factors that was to determine the first stage initiation of Op ISIS by the anonymous Rcord strike team. Of the many other motivations, subsequently broadcast across cyberspace, through the creation and proliferation of the Rcord's own unique series of videos, another primary motivation reminiscent of op-chainology, the now legendary online campaign by Anonymous against the Church of Scientology, was and is the fact that Anonymous sees the internet as its own principal domain, and that anything that infringes on that domain, in an oppressive way, is a fair and legitimate target for Anonymous. Now, one thing left to be said: remember, we are Rcord, we are Anonymous, we are Legion, we do not forgive, we do not forget, expect us.